This is my version of how Gary Oak's Raticate died. Gary Oak was in his backyard, hard at work with the shovel. He was filling up some holes a few stray digwits had made, ruining the grassy field. His sister opened the back door and called out to him, "Gary, I made some lemonade for you. You've got to keep cool out here." He kept shoveling dirt into the holes as though he did not hear her. "Gary, lemonade," she called again, the glass in her hand. Eyes swam about in the cold, bright yellow liquid. Gary pounded the shovel head into the ground harder, lost deep in thought. "Do you want any? Gare Bear!" He suddenly seemed to come out of a trance, making a clumsy thrust at the ground which caused the shovel to veer off to the side. As he lost his grip, a thin edge on the handle sliced open his right hand. He let out a small cry of pain as the shovel hit the ground, and looked down at the narrow gaping wound in his palm. It just stared back at him for a few moments, then began to ooze out a thick trickle of blood. With a bitter glare, he looked back at his sister. A bit frightened, she slowly closed the door, leaving him alone. He looked back down at his hand, gazing at the blood. With a spark of hatred, he remembered his next-door neighbor, Red, another Pokemon trainer his age who his grandfather, Professor Oak, took a liking to. Gary could never understand what Gramps saw in Red. He was just an arrogant punk, always trying to one-up Gary. He hated Red with every fiber of his being, wishing he had never existed. Being a Pokemon trainer was all Gary was any good at, and having that hope crushed by Red was just too much for him to bear. Clenching his fist tightly, more of the red liquid ran down the side of his hand, dripping down to the ground. "I'll get you one day, Red," he vowed as he turned to the house. Slowly heading inside, he rested the shovel near the back door and entered his home. His sister was about to put away his lemonade in the fridge, but stopped when she saw him returning. He was walking towards the sink. "Are you sure you don't want any lemonade? It will be diluted once the ice melts." He ignored her, putting his wound under some running water and then drying it quickly. His concerned sister noticed this, asking, "What's wrong with your hand?" He hid it by his side, answering, "Nothing." The quiet young man grabbed his backpack before quickly leaving through the front door. He kept his head down as he hurried past Red's house, making sure not to step onto the property tarnished by that boy's vile presence. Gary reached into his backpack, pulling out one of his 6 Pokeballs. This one was special, with the letter R painted on the front. "I can beat him with you," Gary whispered, clutching the precious Pokeball tightly. "I trust you more than any of my other Pokemon." Sure, Gary's very first Pokemon, the Charmander he chose at his grandfather's research lab, was loved dearly by him, but this one was his pride and joy. As he walked along the grassy route leading from Pallet Town to Viridian City, he encountered a small Pidgey. Gary tried to walk around it, but it pestered him, not letting him pass. With an annoyed frown, he tossed the Pokeball in his hand, releasing his mighty Raticate. The Pidgey attacked it with a gust, which barely harmed the Pokemon. Upon command, the Raticate unleashed a vicious Hyper Fang assault, instantly knocking the weak Pidgey unconscious. "Again," Gary ordered quietly as he stood over the bird. His loyal Raticate obeyed, attacking once more. "Again," Gary repeated. This time the large rat's teeth drew blood, tearing at the soft belly. "That's it, tear it up." He forced it to bite the helpless creature again and again, giving him a dark, wicked sense of pleasure. At last, with a cold, satisfied smile, he commanded his Raticate to stop and pat its head, muttering, "Good boy." As they left the bloody, tattered mess of the bird behind, it lay unnaturally still, not making a sound. Gary put his Raticate back in its Pokeball before heading into Viridian City. He didn't want anyone seeing the blood on the rat's mouth. Walking into the local Poke Center, the boy hoped for a chance to talk to Nurse Joy, a young woman he secretly admired who worked there. He was in luck today as he timidly walked up to the front desk, asking the man there, "Is Nurse Joy in today?" "Why, yes, she is," the man answered kindly. "Could I see her, if she isn't too busy?" Let me go see if she's available." The man exited to a back room. Gary nervously squeezed his shirt as he waited. The man quickly returned with Nurse Joy, saying, "I believe you have a visitor." The boy's face lit up when he saw her approaching. The cheerful nurse, being older and much taller, bent down a bit to level with him, saying, "Why, hello, Gary. How are you today?" "Fine," he stammered with a blush as he felt her big green eyes gazing at him. My Raticate got hurt in battle. Do you think you could heal it for me, please?" "Of course, Gary," Nurse Joy answered happily. He held out his Pokeball in his left hand, which the happy nurse took. His skin brushed against hers in the process, making the hair on his neck tingle. She spotted the wound on his right hand, asking, "What happened to your hand?" He thought for a moment, then fibbed. I slipped on the way here, fell near some sharp rocks." "Poor dear. Let's get that fixed up." Nurse Joy gave Gary's Pokeball back to him and pulled a roll of bandages out of her nurse uniform. She knelt by him, took his hand, and dabbed his wound with an antibacterial solvent. "This will sting, but only for a little bit." He winced as the liquid burned in his cut, but his shy smile quickly returned as he felt her soft touch. Gary couldn't help but gaze upon her beauty and elegance as she carefully applied a bandage to his wound. "All done." She gave Gary a bright smile that made his heart melt. "Thanks, Nurse Joy." He felt his face grow hot as he looked away shyly. Any time. Now what was the other thing you came here for?" Nothing. Just passing through." "All right. We hope to see you again, Gary." With that, the young nurse left to tend to work down a hallway. Gary watched her go until she turned a corner, her pink hair flowing after her. With a lovesick grin plastered to his red face, he left the Poke Center feeling content. Nothing could ruin his day now. The next morning, Gary was eager to see Nurse Joy again, but the route to Viridian City was partially blocked by a plethora of police tape, not allowing him to cross. He remembered that was where he had forced his beloved Raticate to kill the Pidgey, and quickly headed back home to avoid suspicion. Along the way, he passed by Red, who was leaning up against the route entrance, his arms crossed. "Hey, Gary, you know anything about those cops up there?" Gary's face immediately turned into a bitter frown as he grumbled, "No." Course you wouldn't. Hey, I saw you in Viridian City yesterday. That was priceless how you got all nervous when Nurse Joy was doctoring you up." Gary felt his face turn red. You saw that?" "Sure did. You looked so pathetic, Gare Bear." Gary gritted his teeth, growling, "What did you call me?" "You heard me," Red said with a smirk. Boiling with anger, Gary balled his hand into a fist, but quickly put it away when he saw police approaching from the route. With great frustration, he stormed off to his house in a hurry. "Jerk," he murmured to himself as he slammed the door shut behind him. Stomping upstairs to his room, Gary closed his door and fiddled with his Raticate Pokeball. "We'll beat him at his own game some day, won't we, Raticate?" With a grin, he imagined the look of utter defeat on Red's face after being beaten in a Pokemon battle. Looking out his window at Red, he glared down at the boy hatefully. "In time, Red." Gary noticed the group of police officers passing by Red after asking him a few quick questions. "I'll have to be more careful," Gary thought to himself. After some time, the police left, and Gary went outside to go visit Gramps. Maybe he could help. Entering his grandfather's research lab, his face twisted into an expression of disapproval when he saw Red there conversing with him. His trusty Pikachu stood by his feet. "Hey, Gramps!" The old man noticed Gary approaching and replied, "Why, hello, Gary. It's been a while. I was just telling Red here about the legendary Pokemon Zapdos. He's hoping to capture it someday from the abandoned power plant by Cerulean City." Red gave his rival a smug smirk. Gary grimaced, saying, "Well, maybe I'll get it first." "I'm not too sure about that, Gary." "What do you mean?" Gary asked, a bit offended. "Red here seems to spend more time training and loving his Pokemon. I hardly ever see you working on yours," Professor Oak said, giving Red's head a pat. "Take a look here at Red's Pikachu." With a pat to his chest, the Pokemon jumped into Red's arms, squeaking happily. Professor Oak smiled and walked over to his grandson. "You see, Gary, Pokemon need a lot of training, but just as much love." "Yeah," Gary murmured as he stared at the Pikachu in Red's arms. "If only I could get rid of you," he thought. Then that would break his greedy little heart. Thinking a bit more, Gary declared, "Well, I'd best be on my way, Gramps. Just thought I'd stop by and say hi." With that, he turned and began to leave. "All right, nice seeing you, Gary," Professor Oak called after him with a wave. Yeah, but to you it's probably nicer seeing red, Gary thought. What makes him so special? Just because everyone likes him? That doesn't make him any better than me. I'll show him. Leaving frustrated, Gary noticed the path to Viridian City was now open, with police tape left encircling the murder scene he had created. As a touch of hope brushed through his mind, he smiled and hurried for the entrance. Unable to contain his excitement, he broke out into a dash until he made it to the Viridian City Poke Center. Once again, he was in luck. Nurse Joy was on her lunch break. She recognized him as she ate at a small side table in a corner, waving. Feeling his face grow hot again, he walked up to her timidly as she unwrapped a sandwich. "Good to see you again, Gary. What brings you here?" she asked. He sat in the seat across from her, scratching the back of his head as he tried to think up another lie. Just here to heal some Pokemon. Been busy training a lot." "Wow, that's great to hear. Seeing ambitious trainers as young as you puts a smile on my face. Too many kids these days would rather play video games than stay inside all day," Nurse Joy answered. "Oh, well, for me it's all about raising Pokemon," Gary said shyly. "What do you have with you?" Nurse Joy asked out of curiosity after taking a sip of apple juice. "A Charmeleon, Pidgeotto, Abra, and my favorite, my Raticate." Gary couldn't hide the proud smile as he mentioned the last one. "I imagine your Raticate is pretty strong. You may want to focus on leveling up your Abra so you can have a more balanced team," Nurse Joy recommended. Gary hadn't really considered that since he focused so much on his Raticate, and Abra was quite time-consuming to train. "I'll definitely do that. Thanks for the advice, Nurse Joy." She nodded as she dumped the remains of her lunch in a brown sack. "Well, my lunch break is over," she said as she raised an untouched apple to drop in the sack. "Oh, would you like this apple, Gary? I'm so full, and I don't want it to go to waste." Gary did not feel hungry, but gladly accepted it anyways, saying, "I'm starving. Thank you very much, Nurse Joy." "You're welcome." She stood from the table and tossed her sack into a nearby trash can, saying, "You have a good day, Gary." With a glowing smile, she put a hand on his shoulder. He felt paralyzed by her touch, making a silent gasp. All he could do was watch her walk off to return to work. By the time she was gone, he finally managed to answer, "You too." Slowly rising to his feet, he hobbled out of the Poke Center and shook his head, dazed with infatuation. "I need to get out of here. Become stronger, more focused. I can visit Nurse Joy later. Maybe she'll be more interested in me when she sees how strong my Pokemon are." Gary spent the rest of his day training his weak Abra. Even when the sun began to fall and darkness slowly entered the sky, he kept pushing his Pokemon to fight. Remembering that snot-nosed punk his grandfather seemingly preferred over him, he became filled with hatred and bitterness. He found a small wild Caterpie and ordered his Charmeleon to burn it alive. With a wicked grin, he watched it become consumed in flames and wither away to a blackened corpse. Feeling much better, Gary took it home in a large sack and dug open one of the holes in his backyard he had filled the other day. Dumping the sack into the dark abyss, he quietly filled it back up, leaving no trace of the charred remains of the dead Caterpie. For about a week, Gary rose early to keep training his Pokemon, all of them after his Abra evolved into a Kadabra. After a long morning of battling, he decided to go visit his Gramps to impress him with his Pokemon. But then he decided a real way to get his approval would be to catch the wild Zapdos Rand planned to obtain. Traveling all the way to Cerulean City, he eventually made his way to the abandoned power plant, armed with some Ultra Balls he had spent the last of his money on. Gary slowly fought his way through the army of wild Pokemon in the power plant until he encountered the mighty Zapdos and managed to weaken it with the psychic powers of his Kadabra. Barely capturing the near-unconscious bird, he suddenly thought of how impressed Nurse Joy would be when she saw it. "Maybe she'd even like to be with me, now that I have this," Gary thought to himself. He hurried back to Viridian City to switch out his old Pidgeotto for the legendary Zapdos he had just caught. Feeling like a true champion, he retrieved the new Pokemon, healed it, and quickly looked around for Nurse Joy. Spotting her from afar, he prepared to show off his new Zapdos and capture her heart. The young boy stopped dead in his tracks when he saw a tall, handsome young man approach her with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. His heart sank as he watched them greet each other and share a romantic kiss. Feeling completely crushed, Gary didn't even care he had just caught one of the 3 legendary bird Pokemon. With tears swelling in his eyes, he headed home, trying to forget about Nurse Joy and how foolish he had been. At least I can still impress Gramps, he thought to himself. With his mood slightly lifted, he rushed to the Oak Research Lab in hopes of gaining the upper hand against Red for once. Again, Red was already there with Gramps. Perfect timing, punk, Gary sneered to himself as he approached with the Zapdos Pokeball in his hand. Oh, Gary, your timing is impeccable, Professor Oak said as he saw his grandson. Yeah, great. Guess what, Gramps? I caught the legendary Zapdos. Want to see it? Professor Oak chuckled. My, how you 2 youngsters keep surprising me. Red was just showing me the other 2 legendary birds, Articuno and Moltres. He caught them all by himself. Go ahead, show Gary. With a smirk, Red unveiled the fire and ice birds from their Pokeballs. Professor Oak watched in awe as they swirled above Red in a circle of blazing embers and chilly snowflakes that vanished as they fell around the boy. Gary watched in disbelief as he realized he had failed again. Well, go on, Gary. Let yours out so the trio can be united, Gramps urged him. With a disappointed frown, Gary let out his Zapdos, not caring much to stay. Feeling pushed aside and gravely defeated, the sad boy quietly left, Gramps too busy watching the incredible Pokemon to notice. He returned to his home to grab a few things. Feeling parched, he reached into the fridge and took the glass of lemonade his sister had made for him a week ago. It was now bland and terribly diluted, but he took a long sip, not caring. I'll be gone for a few days, maybe a week, he muttered as he passed by his sister playing with some dolls in the living room. She watched with concern as he gripped his forehead, the boy's body overflowing with anxiety. Are you all right, Care Bear?
Don't call me that!
In a blaze of fury, Gary hurled the glass of lemonade with all his strength. It sailed through the air and shattered loudly against the dining room wall. His sister gasped and hid behind a large doll of hers, frightened.
Only Mother is allowed to call me that!
But Mother's dead. Gary breathed heavily, slowly calming down as his burning anger turned to sorrow. I know. Any word from Dad? His sister shook her head, coming out from behind her doll a bit. He hasn't written to us in weeks. The bum, Gary muttered. I wouldn't let him set one foot in this house even if he did come back. His head clouded with a mixture of negative emotions. He gathered his things and left, leaving a letter by Gramps' lab to let him know he would be gone for a while and to take care of his sister for him. Grimly passing through Viridian City, he didn't give the Poke Center so much as a glance. He tried to forget how mistreated and uncared for he had been, forgetting everything when he was in battle with other trainers, occasionally slaughtering more wild Pokemon when his inner demons got the best of him. Covering his tracks and the remains of his dark deeds, he eventually decided to enjoy himself and went to Vermilion City. There he bought a ticket for the SS Anne, a ship that came by once a year for trainers to enjoy a cruise and battle each other. Gary mainly came to test his powerful Pokemon. Halfway through the ship's course, he bumped into Red, who grinned when he saw Gary. Hey, you. Want a battle? Gary considered it for a moment. No, he answered before walking past Red, who crossed his arms. Afraid you'll lose? I don't blame you. That's not it, Gary snapped defiantly. Then come on, let's go, Red urged him. Gary hesitated, facing the boy, then agreed bitterly. Fine. An intense battle commenced, with Gary holding his own for a while. But somewhere in the midst of the fight, he began to lose, until all but his Raticate had fainted. He had used all his potions and revives, and didn't want to make his best Pokemon face Red's Moltres, but he had no choice. Fight well he did, but the Moltres was too powerful, annihilating his Raticate with an overwhelming fire spin. Gary ran up to his badly injured Pokemon. It was covered in severe burn wounds, far more injured than his other Pokemon. He knelt over it, tears falling from his face and hissing as they reached the Raticate's burnt skin. Very unwise of you to use a stupid Raticate this late in your journey, Red sneered as he walked away. You aren't worth my time. Gary held his Raticate tightly, slowly pulled himself together, and frantically looked around until he found a security guard.
Please, you've got to help me find a Poke Center, mister.
There are none on the ship, kid.
Then we must stop the ship. My Raticate is in desperate need of help.
The ship stops in a few hours, the guard said with an unfriendly frown. Now scram, will you? I'm on my break.
Gary was unable to find any help on the ship, and by the time the cruise had ended, his Raticate was hardly breathing. He rushed to the nearest Poke Center and gave them his dying Pokemon, pleading they heal him. As he handed the massive rat over, it drew its last breath and collapsed. With a gasp, the nurse checked its vitals and quietly said, "It's dead."
What?
No, it can't be. He can still make it. He wouldn't go out that easy. The nurse looked very sympathetic at the upset boy. I'm very sorry for your loss. He quickly took the Raticate from her and shook it violently. Come on, I know you're still there. Come back. As he shook it, its head slumped over like a dead flower, completely lifeless. Come back, he pleaded quietly, beginning to accept the reality. And tears flowing down his face, he held the Raticate tightly to his chest, squeezing his eyes shut. I'm sorry I didn't save you in time. Please forgive me. I love you. His legs trembling, he collapsed onto the floor of the Poke Center, sobbing and holding his dead friend as tight as he could. Gary returned home after the incident. He buried his Raticate in Lavender Town and dwelled in a heavy state of depression and grief for weeks. Occasionally he would go visit the tombstone atop his friend's grave, but other than that he remained in his room. Gary was no longer the sweet little boy everyone knew him as. He was drained of all happiness, his love for anything now gone. The boy could only focus on his obsession over Red, how he wished to punish him. The world seemed so unfair to Gary, but Red was the only one he cared to lash out at. During this time of seclusion, he became consumed with hatred. One day, when no one else was around, he went to his backyard to fill more holes the Digwits had made recently, tired of sitting in his room. It wasn't long before Red noticed and came about to pester him. I see you aren't wearing your Pokebelt anymore. Looks like you wised up and decided to stay out of my way. Gary kept his back to Red as he continued to shovel soil into the holes. Still choked up over that dumb rat, huh? Who cares? It was just a Raticate. Gary stopped midway through thrusting the shovel head into the ground and turned to face Red, a blank expression on his now pale face. An intense wave of danger rushed to Red's brain. He could tell Gary was not the same person he knew back on the cruise ship. The usual bright sparkle in his eyes was gone. All Red could see in them was a cold darkness. He became more afraid as an eerie smile spread across Gary's lips, and he approached, wielding the shovel like an axe. I care, that's who. Hey, take it easy, I didn't mean it, Red pleaded as he backed away. His foot plummeted into one of the holes, becoming stuck. Hey, I can't move! He desperately tried to free his foot as Gary approached, gripping the shovel tightly. Ever heard of an eye for an eye, Red? For some time, Gary pummeled Red with the steel shovel head, smiling wider than ever as he did it. Eventually, Red lay still, not breathing, but Gary continued to beat his ravaged body until he was satisfied. Widening one of the Digwit holes, he freed Red's bloodied body and rolled it into the hole, burying him as he muttered, Who cares? It was just Red.